Well, I'll start admitting people when they trickle in, but we'll get started now. So first I want to introduce myself. I'm Brittany Knight. I'll be the build facilitator, and I want to welcome you to Reinventing Leadership with Anna Knutson. During this session, we will discuss a values-first leadership and how you can leverage your values as a true north for showing up and showing out for your team. I do want to note that this session will be recorded, so by having your camera and microphone on to ask questions, you are giving your permission to be recorded. And we do encourage you to ask questions. So at the end of the session, we will be holding a 15-minute Q&A. So feel free to pop your questions in the chat until then. And at that time, we'd love to see and hear you IRL. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce you to our speaker, Anna Knutson. First and foremost, Anna is a Beyonce fan and peach Italian soda lover. Second to that, she's a strategic marketer with a knack for understanding people. With a background in traditional and digital marketing and people leadership, Anna is the Associate Director of Client Strategy at Madfish Digital, a values-based digital marketing agency here in Portland, Oregon. A California native with a stint in the Midwest, Anna graduated from Minnesota State University Moorhead with a BS in advertising and a minor in women and gender studies. She is passionate about elevating the voices of women of color and building teams that thrive. When she's not working, Anna enjoys self-care, a true Taurus, and cooking and tarot reading. Let's give a warm welcome to Anna. Take it away.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining today. I'm super excited to be here. As Brittany said, my name is Anna Knutson, and I am the Associate Director of Client Strategy at Madfish Digital. I wanted to take a minute just before we jump in to acknowledge the Cowlitz Indigenous people whose land I'm on today, speaking to you all, and literally always, because this is where my house is. But yeah, just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that. Everyone knows, or at least I hope, what they signed up for today. But I will be, let's see, click. But I'll be talking to you all about my experience this year and values-driven leadership during times of crisis. One thing to note that throughout this presentation, there will be opportunities to engage in discussion, leveraging the Zoom chat feature. So please feel free to join in on the conversation there. I'm hoping that this can be a bit of a collaborative discussion throughout, but I'll also open it up for questions at the end, as Brittany noted. But yeah, feel free to ask me questions, but I also am fully aware that there are great people in attendance today that might have some great resources and experiences to share, so please feel free to add to the conversation there. So how did we get here? It comes up almost like word vomit. Sorry for the gross reference, but here we are. 2020 has been an absolutely wild year for all of us. I don't know about all of you, but this past spring when at Madfish, we transitioned from a fully remote or a fully in-office team to a fully remote team, I certainly felt a little bit scattered. A bit scattered, if I'm being honest. The whole, I don't know, the world as we knew it was kind of crashing down around us a bit. And I don't really think that it matters if you're a people manager, not a people manager, a CEO, whatever role you have within an organization. 2020 absolutely pushed all of us outside of our comfort zones. The rule book was tossed out of the window fast as hell. Expectations went out the window just right along with it. And all in all, it was just kind of wild. So before we jump in, I wanted to get a little temperature check on the Zoom today. So if you all want to pop in the chat how you're feeling, a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being things are bomb, popping, going great, 1 being oh no energy, like we're in trouble. Ooh, we got a 9, a 7, 9. Man, you guys are great. 8. Yeah, 3, having trouble setting boundaries. Totally hear that. I think that that's a really common thing that we're feeling this year. 6s, 7s. So kind of all across the board. Well, shoot, all y'all with 9s. Love to hear it. 3 to 6. Yeah. Yeah. We all kind of bounce a little bit between all the numbers all the time. I do this with our team internally every single week. And we're always kind of all across the board. We do a scale of 1 to 10 personal, scale of 1 to 10 work. And it's really interesting to see how those things compare. If we were, or when we did do this temperature check back in April on my team, I certainly was feeling around a 3. One of the key questions that I asked myself when I was feeling that way, though, was how am I showing up for my team and how am I showing up for me? I'm a really big believer that we can't care for others unless we care for ourselves, and we can't give anybody else 100% unless we are doing that for us too. And so it's super critical that when we're moving through these times of crisis and really hard moments, it's absolutely just critical that we pull ourselves out of the weeds, we take a step back, we're able to pull ourselves up to 10,000 feet, look at all of the things that are at play, and take that information and build a guided roadmap for ourselves. That's really where our values come into play. Today, if I'm doing scale of 1 to 10, I'm certainly at an 8 or a 9. I genuinely do feel really focused. I feel really just a lot of forward momentum right now. I feel curious. I feel ready instead of reactive. And so today I wanted to give you all some tips that I've been using throughout this past year to help me lead values first and toward my true north. To really get into what I used to shift my thinking from scattered to focused was leveraging the 3 steps that I've outlined here. So determining my values and my valued goals, setting intentions for myself, and then holding myself accountable to those intentions. This, I guess, if anybody has paper close, if they have their build program, feel free to pull that out. If you are on your computer and you have a second screen, pop up your notepad. And if you also don't want to do any of that, that's cool too. Do you? But we're going to do kind of a little bit of a workshop, nothing crazy. But really the first piece of this is really getting an understanding of what valued goals are. So everyone's ready to roll. Valued goals are personal objectives that have emotional significance, that are aligned with your core principles and guide your actions. If you've already done a lot of values work in the past, please feel free to drop some of those values in the chat. It's super helpful for folks who haven't necessarily had a chance to do any of that exploration work already. There are also a ton of values lists out on the web to get your mind kind of moving into this space and help you determine what your values might be. At Madfish, I've been really grateful to go through a couple of different values exercises with a few of our team members, and we've leveraged Brene Brown's Dare to Lead, and honestly, I'm like a low-key Brene Brown stan. So if you love her, love to hear it. If you haven't listened to our podcast yet, 15 out of 10 recommend. Brene, I think, wants folks to kind of dial into 2 specific values. A lot of folks do it differently. I personally like 5 to 6 because I could never, 2 is just not enough, and I do not like rules. And so it doesn't need to be a super rigid thing. Whatever works best for you, go with that. So really identifying your values and kind of moving on from Brene Brown, though I could talk about her forever. I spent a lot of time going through variations of questions like the ones that I've outlined here. I started out with probably a list of 30 or so values. And honestly, if you've done this work in the past, it is so easy to go just on and on. So you kind of have to cut yourself off a little bit. But if you have somebody who you feel comfortable going through questions like this with, I absolutely recommend that as well. Going through these types of questions and exercises like this can just be a really valuable way to figure out your values, have somebody kind of keep you on track and tie things back to really what you're there to do, determine your values. So what values or beliefs have shaped your life up until this point? And again, please feel free to pop them into the chat as we go along. But of course, also do not have to. What are your strongest values and principles? What beliefs currently motivate you and drive your life today? What characteristics do you see in others that you admire or look up to that resonate with you? Oh, I love this. Authenticity, growth, being the best, Leo energy here. Honesty, transparency, social responsibility, and giving back, balance. Yeah, these are all really, really, really great. For me, I spent a lot of time jumping back to that initial question of how am I showing up for my team and how am I showing up for myself to be kind of my stress test, I guess, against the values that I am choosing and that I'm using to guide me forward. And honestly, I'll come back to that question a couple of different times throughout this presentation. And so, yeah, just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. It certainly keeps me moving forward whenever I'm in a tough spot or whenever I need to use that as a stress test. Oh, integrity, compassion, open heart. Love these values, you guys, gals, folks, on it. Once you have your values, my values include growth, open and direct expression, joy, consistency, and confidence. We want to make sure that we're building out valued goals around those things. So to build out valued goals, we want to make sure that those goals help differentiate the important from the unimportant. We want to reflect our aspirations. We want our valued goals to reflect our aspirations and stretch us to grow. We want our valued goals to be a source of motivation and energy, specifically when things get a little bit more challenging. And then we really want our valued goals to guide our life in a positive direction and move us forward. I think that of all of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today, I think guiding your life in a positive direction to move us forward is probably the most key piece of all of this, specifically around crises, whatever that is, whether it's a pandemic, fingers crossed, we're not going through that. Hopefully that ends soon. I mean, TBD, racial injustice, really anything that arises for you in terms of a crisis, whether it's at work or home. We always want to make sure that we are working towards something that guides us in life in a positive direction and moves us forward. When we're really going through it, and I'll speak for myself, don't want to speak for anybody else, but it can be hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel sometimes. And leveraging my values as a roadmap forward constantly keeps me grounded. There are so many things happening in the world around us, not like anybody needs a reminder of that. But sometimes our jobs can feel a bit small in comparison to those things. And it's super important to remember, and specifically people managers, that you're showing up for other people every single day. And I don't know why, when I was thinking about this presentation, when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to you all about, it kind of just stuck with me that oftentimes for people managers, or whenever you're in a leadership role of some kind, you oftentimes represent somebody else's true north. And I think that that's really important work to remember. So putting it all together, here are both my values and my valued goals. I wanted to share these with you just as a starting point for what your valued goals might look like once you've moved through this roadmap. But for me, growth means that I will leverage each challenge as an opportunity to learn and remain curious. Open and direct expression, I will be genuine and forthright in my communication, ask for what I need, and clearly set expectations. I will be joyful. And joy is so important to me. If some of the folks on here who know me, fun and joy is certainly something that's really important to me, but I'll be joyful during times of crisis as a form of self-care, but then also as a form of resistance. Consistency, I'll be consistent when everything feels inconsistent. That feels like very real for 2020. And then confidence. I'll be unapologetic in my decisions and in my communication. All right. So we're leaving this like the values, value goals section, jumping into setting intentions and holding ourselves accountable. But intention setting is ultimately the manifestation of your goals playing out in everyday life. When you're thinking about setting intentions, you want to state what you intend to accomplish through your actions. You want to commit to yourself what you want your journey to be about as you move forward. And your intention should provide direction for you as you navigate challenges and difficult conversations. As part of this, intention setting and holding yourself accountable obviously go very much hand in hand, and holding yourself accountable is really what anchors you to those intentions and the path toward your true north. Accountability during crisis will keep you moving forward. It gives you the opportunity to be reflective and shift gears when maybe you don't have when maybe you don't live your values fully, which we all do from time to time, so we're not perfect. But again, I'll ask this question: how am I showing up for my team? How am I showing up for me? I know I've asked it a couple of times, but really this is honestly my ultimate accountability question. Did I show up the way I intended? If not, why? With accountability, we want to make sure that we're building time into our week or whatever cadence it is that we are on in terms of setting intentions and holding ourselves accountable to reflect on how things are going. We want to track and write things down. Did I feel stressed or anxious or grouchy? Ask yourself why and dissect that a little bit. Did a situation come up that was in direct conflict with your values? I know for me personally, that would make me feel a little bit stressed, maybe a little bit frustrated, but be really mindful of those feelings. They're oftentimes trying to teach us something, bubble something up to the surface that maybe we're keeping down inside. And so whenever we can break things down, when we're feeling a certain type of way other than wonderful, and even when we're feeling wonderful, we can improve for the future. If you've had an awesome week and you're staying true to your values, treat yourself. We all need little wins. It doesn't matter if things are going great or things are a little bit bleak, like 2020 kind of has been just this year to date. But yeah, celebrate those little wins. Grab yourself some ice cream, grab some wine, grab some chocolate, movie, whatever, a treat. Yeah, just treat yourself. And then last, and I say this and I like take a huge deep breath, like give yourself a little bit of grace, specifically during times of crisis, but then also always. We tend to be really hard on ourselves a lot of times. And so we hold ourselves to really intense expectations, oftentimes unrealistic expectations. But we're humans. We don't always have all of the answers. We all will make mistakes. Cut yourself some slack and just keep it moving. So putting this into action, I wanted to say, also, I'm just like kind of blown away. I cruised through this, but putting this into action, hopefully you guys have some questions for me. But I want to thank you all so much today for your time. And really in closing, I wanted to leave you with a few takeaways to put in action once you leave this conference. But take some time to develop and fully flesh out your values and your valued goals to guide your life in a positive direction. Set intentions for yourself consistently. Give yourself time to reflect and check in on how things are going. And then also ask, how am I showing up for my team? How am I showing up for me? And do you? Yeah. Well, question time. So
yes. Thank you so much, Anna. That was so insightful. My mind is blown. And we're going to start off the Q&A session, and we'd love for you guys to show your face or just speak out. So feel free to show your video, unmute, and ask your questions. But first, Anna, I do want to start off with the first question.
Yeah.
So I wrote it down as you were going through. Especially now and just always, I think a lot of us struggle with confidence and imposter syndrome. Especially as leaders. And how do you suggest that we practice confidence?
I think that that's a great question. Something that comes to mind for me, and that I was told probably a couple of years ago from Ben, who is co-owners of Madfish. He said, "You don't have to be good at it; you just have to do it." And I think that that's a good piece of advice for all of us. Things might feel really uncomfortable as we are kind of diving into it, but just go heads first. Um, yeah, dive in.
As simple as it is, it's such a great solution because like sometimes you just like you freeze up and you just
Totally.
don't do anything. And I've found myself doing that a lot lately, and I don't know why. But I mean, as simple of an answer that is, I mean, yes, you just have to just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It might be uncomfortable, but we're
Yeah.
all uncomfortable. So here we are.
So chime in, anybody. Let's hear your questions.
Hey, Anna, I'm going to just jump in with a question right away. So I just had a question as a leader, if you have any suggestions about creating space for your team to A, kind of express and just check in with their personal values, and then B, just like space for processing some of the very real things, obviously the pandemic, social justice issues that can affect how we show up at work.
Yeah. So with my team in particular, we have weekly one-on-ones always for an hour, depending on what works best for the person, where we just break down what's happening at work, what's happening in your personal life. But then we also have weekly all team circle ups. So at Madfish, we call our client strategy team, the team that I lead, our Wolf Pack. And we have our Wolfpack check-ins where we spend time talking through our roses and thorns. So what was one rose for you this week? What was one thorn for you this week? We break down and troubleshoot some of those things, those thorns that might come up as they inevitably do. And help each other find solutions for any challenges that they're facing. We do our scale of 1 to 10 exercise, but then we also just talk about like, what's happening in the world. The way that I'm processing something is going to be very different than the way that you process something. And just having an open and honest discussion about that, I think that putting our best foot forward in terms of being genuine and authentic in those situations is probably the best thing that we can do for ourselves, but then also for the teams that we're leading.
Awesome. It looks like we have another question from Zach Toter. If you don't want to speak out, I can read that question off. I'll just go ahead and do it. So it looks like his question is, I am having trouble coming up with values that guide me. How did you decide on yours?
Love that question. I honestly, so I went through, and as I said, I had about 30 different values that I had landed on. I went through, grouped those values by things that were similar. So for example, I had, I want to say it was like, well, of course, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but grouping your values by things that are similar will give you the opportunity to narrow things down so you don't just have two values that are either the exact same. We want to make sure that your values are representative of you as a whole person and not necessarily just one facet of who you are.
Great answer. All right, does anybody else have any more questions for Anna before we go off to the main stage and we go off to our next sessions?
I have a question. How has understanding your teammates' values helped you work together, and how can we use that in our day-to-day?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me think on it a sec. I think understanding other people's values specifically helps us show up to conversations more prepared and ready for, literally ready for anything that can come up. I think values are really important, especially when there's like interpersonal conflict happening. It helps you understand why somebody is maybe feeling the way that they are. Like I said earlier, if I'm really frustrated because for X, Y, or Z reason, and I break that down and I find, well, I'm frustrated because this is the fourth time maybe I've asked somebody to do this. They're not necessarily being consistent. That's one of my core values. I know that that's like why I'm frustrated here. Like my core values being challenged completely. And so I think that it's important that we break those things down just as a team, talk about those things, and just, again, kind of jumping back to being authentic and genuine in that. We're all people. We all have core values that are going to be challenged at one point or another. And just being real about that with each other, I think, is probably the best way that we can work together. I don't know if that answers your question, but let me know.
I'll ask one. So who do you have in your, or who do you expect, or do you ask certain people to hold you accountable to certain of your goals? And like, I think one of them I just saw when you posted was like being open. And so like, I could see somebody being like, hey, you weren't very open on this, this thing. Or so is there certain people you ask, or are you just like an open book to everybody just to be like, hey, hold me accountable in these kind of areas? Or how does that work for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a line between like need to know versus like want to know information, right? Like I'm not gonna, I'm not just an open book, but I think that it's important that when we are sharing information that we can share with folks, that we're clear about that. We're clear communicators. I think for me, open and honest or open and direct expression is really rooted in my ability to ask for what I need. I know that that's like where that core value came from for me, just because sometimes when we're working on teams, we can feel like we're pushed into a corner. We can feel like, oh, maybe I don't actually have all of the information that I need to be successful in this, and I need to advocate for myself in that. And ultimately, it's just me being accountable for the experience that I'm having. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's really, I guess, kind of diving back to what you were asking about, how do other people hold me accountable? I can talk to my manager about the values that I'm working on this month, but then I also spend a lot of time on a weekly basis after our Wolfpack check-ins with our internal team, thinking about how I showed up to those conversations. I write down, like, if I was ever feeling, like if something happened that I didn't necessarily love how I showed up, I'll write that down for myself and think about, okay, so what are the actions that I can take on my end to make sure that the way that I am showing up is what I intended to do.
I have another question for you, Anna. So speaking about accountability, how do you hold yourself accountable when there's nobody around to hold you accountable, especially when you're having a day or a week or a year?
Or a year. Yeah, no, I mean, again, it goes back to honestly me just tracking those things for myself. I find that there is so much value in being reflective and thinking about how things have gone. Not everything is going to go my way. 2020 certainly has not. And so thinking about how I could have done a better job, or shoot, honestly, I keep talking about the negative part of it, but if I did show up in a way that I was really proud of, or advocated for myself in a way that was meaningful to me, I write those things down. I track those things. I talk about them with my team, or I'll talk about them with my manager. And yeah, I think it's just important to be, values are also a very, it's kind of a touchy subject. It's really personal. And so I think that you may not always feel safe to show up and talk about those things, but with folks that you, oh, sorry, my dog is gonna just go berserk. But if you have folks in your corner that you feel comfortable talking about these things with, then absolutely do that. I think that honestly, I think it feels really great to just get your values out into the open, talk about them with people. And when you don't have people, write them down, track how you're feeling, track your progress, and go from there.
Yeah, I think it's important to have a safe zone, a safe circle of people that you can always express your feelings to, because like you said, we're all people, we're humans, we need that. Does anybody have any more questions? We have about 10 minutes left, 12 minutes left in the session, so feel free to ask your questions.
I had a question. Do you ever find yourself revisiting your values or amending them over time? Do you have I find that I do that. Do you have like a schedule that you work on with that?
Yeah, first, thanks for turning your video on. I love your hair. The second piece of that is I don't necessarily change my values, but I do change the valued goals that I'm working toward. And I am kind of on like a monthly cadence with what valued goal I'm working toward that month. Sometimes it'll spill over. Sometimes I'll work on it for 3 months because it's kind of a bigger fish to fry or whatever. But yeah, I definitely see myself or find myself changing my valued goals, but not necessarily my values, because that's just how I want to show up to every situation, whether it's personal or professional.
Do you think your values just evolve over time given, cultural changes?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think that they absolutely can, just because I'm certainly a different person than I was 10 years ago, right? My values have probably shifted a bit, and should have, to be honest. If I was still operating off that, we would be in trouble. But yeah, so definitely. I think as you change and grow as a person, your values likely do too.
Awesome. All right. Does anybody have any more questions? No? All right. Well, if no one has any more questions that they'd like to field to Anna, then we'll end this session. I want to thank Anna so much for her time and her insights. Actually, I have 2 more people in the waiting room, but I don't know if we'll admit them right now.
Oh, I think we have a question from Anya. Is that
Okay.
how you your name?
Yes.
Yeah. What's up?
Anya.
Oh, how are you? Thank you so much. This is really, really nice. And for thought. Question is, how, let's say you feel like you've gotten lost and like off track from your values, even if you do work for a values-driven organization, many of us are feeling the kind of blurring of the line between work and personal life. And I think that a lot of like what you've mentioned a lot of that work comes from having time to reflect. What do you do? How do you get back on track if you just completely lost yourself? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I'll try to answer, but let me know if I am not giving you what you need and we can go from there. But yeah, I think if I ever find myself just kind of like going off the tracks a little bit, I ultimately just jump back in and I'm like, well, if I'm off the tracks, I'm probably not showing up in the way that I intended, right? So like, for me, like, for example, if I am working on growth 1 month as kind of my valued goal, how do I want that to manifest and show up for me in my everyday life? So that is actually what I'm working on this month. And so for me, growth looks like me being calm during situations that would otherwise maybe ruffle my feathers a little bit, and not like I'm not a super calm person otherwise, but just yeah, so I just think about, okay, well, here's how I want to be showing up. Here's how I want growth to manifest for me this month. And if I'm not necessarily seeing that on my end, then I just need to take a step back and kind of reposition. At the end of the day, if I like, specifically with like work from home environments, or any time where we are really blurring those lines, or like right now, if you are working from home, the line is kind of non-existent. I can't necessarily show up and be 100% myself if I don't have those boundaries. Like I firmly believe that. I know full well that if I am just not in the right headspace, I'm not going to be super helpful for my team. So just taking a step back, giving myself time to breathe, like sort my life out and then jump back into it. And you can always recalibrate, right? Like we're all going to be kind of off the rails at some point, and we're going to have to get back on. But yeah, I think that I think ultimately it just jumps back to just I'm not going to be showing up the way that I want to be showing up. So I clearly need to just reevaluate and pivot.
Thank you.
Yeah, did that answer your question?
It did.
Cool.
I don't think there's like one answer, but it is all, you know, it
Yeah.
all gets open. Thank you so much.
For sure. Anything else?
We have about 7 minutes left if we would like to ask any more questions. No? All right, well, thank you, Anna. This is great. We love the value that you brought to this values-driven leadership talk. And we will be going back to the main stage. We have 2 sessions that I'm going to pop here in the chat with the schedule. So feel free to head back there. We've got Redesign, Creating a World that Designs for Everyone, and Redesigning the Office Environment, Responding to the Pandemic as an Opportunity to Create More Equitable Workspace. So thank you again. We loved it, Anna. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, and hit me up on LinkedIn if you have any follow-up questions that you didn't get to ask here. But yeah, thank you all so much for your time. I really just enjoyed chatting with all of you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Everybody enjoy the rest of Build.